It is the Martha Zoller Show. We're in that local election primary season, and one person that's not going to have to worry about that is Representative Will Wade. He is State House 9, and he is joining me right now in the studio. How are you, Will?
I am blessed. Good to see you, Martha. Great to be here with you, and I love the new digs. This is a fantastic way to talk to the people.
Yeah, we may have to put seats out there. I don't know. We'll figure that out. Governor Kemp is going to be signing some bills today that will lower state income taxes. He's going to do that in Augusta today. Then he's going to Athens to speak to the AJC political team at UGA at 5:30. So we're in the bill signing.
That's correct.
Part of this session. Just give us quickly kind of your overview, your 30,000 foot view of how the session went.
Yeah, so I'll say this, this is my fourth session, second term, and the first session, it was COVID, it was crazy, didn't really get to know many people, we were very separated. Over the last couple of years, been able to really kind of get to know other legislators, predominantly those that are in my caucus in the Republican Party, but also getting to work with some honestly moderate Democrats that kind of have an attitude of, look, let's just get some good policy done. We agree on a lot of things, especially when it comes to children's issues. Public safety even has become more of a unifying factor. So this session we were able to get, I would say we didn't have as much of the passionate raucous that sometimes they would get up and try to, take up time and file minority report after minority report on bills. Did they do that a few times? Yes. But the volume of that this session, I think, was probably about half. And I actually have to give Speaker Burns credit for that. He sat down with the minority leadership and some of the more vocal members of the Democratic Party and said, look, we're about doing the business of the state, and there's going to be policies that we're just going to not agree on. And we'll have that debate. But let's not, you don't sacrifice some of the priorities that you agree with us on by taking up all this time fighting things that you just don't have the votes on. So this session, I think we got a lot accomplished, with the tax cuts that he's signing today, with, I think, a good step toward improving the certificate of need to help rural expansion for hospitals, but really ultimately just medical care for our communities. He'll be in Augusta, I think, tomorrow signing healthcare legislation. And then I'm going to be going down to the Capitol on Tuesday. There's some education bill signings that'll be happening at the Capitol on Tuesday, one of which I think is the big budget where we're going to end up passing some teacher pay raises, et cetera. So looking forward to that. May 7th is kind of the governor's deadline for bill signings or vetoes. So the next couple of weeks are going to be a feverish, because you got 180 House members and you got 100 Republicans, and more than likely there's at least one of those bills that was their passion, and they're hoping to make sure the governor signs it and doesn't veto it. I haven't heard any rumors of any major vetoes out there, but the governor has that right and that authority, so we'll see.
And just one of these little known facts, if he doesn't do anything, then it becomes law,
That's
right?
correct. That's
okay.
correct.
So like if he just leaves it, but I can't recall a time that a governor has done that. It's been a very long time.
I think the last time there was a veto was Governor Deal, and it had to do with the RFRA, and then
I'm talking about not signing it at all.
That's
letting
right.
it just go. I haven't heard that in a long time.
I haven't heard that in a long time.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned RFRA, because here's my theory, and you don't have to confirm or deny it,
Sure.
okay? But my theory is that sports betting went down, didn't get a vote, and sort of that helped social conservatives. They were happy about that. So in exchange for that, they didn't get RFRA.
I'm not privy to that. I can
Discussion,
see that. Alignment, that's very rational. I think that there is really a policy question as it relates to the difference between the Senate and the House, as it relates to, do we need to have specific language about discrimination in the bill, or did the fact that we have the hate crimes bill and now we have the anti-Semitism bill, do those statutes now kind of cover that one concern? I know Governor Kemp had his office weighed in on some preferred language that would be very similar to that of the national, the federal law. I'm a supporter of that bill. I signed on to it hoping that we would have an opportunity. I think there's a real good chance next year that the lawyers on both sides of the House will get together and come to an agreement as to that question about discrimination, because obviously the whole point of RFRA is to ensure that we're not discriminating against people based on their faith. And you look at the national picture, there are Christians being attacked just because they happen to have a viewpoint of the world, and it's not bringing judgment. It's just, this is how we believe, and I'm not going to be forced to call you something that you're not, or to recognize something and be forced to. And there's federal case law now where, the baker, all those kind of things. So I think we'll get there, and especially if you look at.
I think it would help though if there was actually a case in Georgia.
Agreed.
And where it happened, everybody talks. Lord knows the terms we've learned since the 2020 election. Standing, you have to have standing. Do you know what I mean? And
right.
Since I know that you don't want legislation to be reactive, but you also don't want it to be too proactive. Do you know what I mean? You got to find that balance, because if it hasn't happened here yet, do we need to regulate it?
The question is does the federal statute cover everybody? And there are, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 36 other states that have made the determination that they want to have a state law. Some of those were through court challenges because of standing that you brought up. But also, if you look at us, we're the last southern state in the southeastern United States that doesn't have it as a state law. So I think that will also help in the 2025 session.
So one of the things that I'm passionate about, and you know that I was one of the founding members of the Georgia Life Alliance, and then I served as their interim executive director when Roe v. Wade was overturned. And during the time of COVID and some changes that were made in the FDA and how drugs were delivered, the abortion pill, along with a number of other things, were allowed to be dispensed without a doctor's visit, okay? And when COVID got done and other things got back to normal, everything except the abortion pill was put back to where you had to have a doctor's visit. And I've spoken to the Democratic, they're called the Women's Caucus, but they ought to be called the Women's Democratic Caucus, because it's all Democrats that's part of it. But I've spoken to them, and they were in agreement with me that my concern is that when you take this particular medication, it elicits a certain response that is serious. And in the past, you had to have 3 doctor's visits, okay? And right now, today, 25% of women that take this end up in the emergency room.
Oh, my.
And 7% end up having to have surgery. In any other procedure in the world, if you had those kinds of numbers, they would say, they wouldn't take it off the market necessarily, but they would say, yeah, you do need to be followed by a physician. When I present that case, even to Democratic women, they agree with me, okay? I look at it as a personal health care issue. I am pro-life. I believe life begins at conception. But I also want whatever we're doing to be as safe as possible.
That's right.
Okay? And so I'm kind of, but when it comes down to voting, they won't take it up and they won't vote for it, even the women, which just shocks me, because any other prescription that had that kind of numbers, where 25% end up in the emergency room and of those 7% have to have surgery, that's not safe to take without some kind of follow through.
Oh, I completely agree. And that scenario you laid out, where privately they agree with you, but then publicly they kind of toe the line. And look, I'll give Democratic leadership at the state level and at the federal level credit for this. And that is, when they ask people to stand in line and vote the way they want them to vote, they don't really, not very many of them are brave enough to step out and vote what they truly believe, whether it's their personal belief or even them representing their district. And I'll give you a shout out to Patty Stinson, formerly known as Patty Bentley. She voted for the school choice bill as a Democrat this year. She was actually the 91st vote.
Did they run somebody against her this election?
I don't think they did.
They did to Misha Maynor?
but I do know that for a couple of weeks, she was probably ostracized, but she voted what she felt like, which is these kids that are you're on the state school board. There are some school systems that are just continually struggling. There are great teachers in that building. There are some that are not that great. and there are some families that have not made education a priority. So it's the ecosystem in that community, and parents and grandparents are just sick and tired of those kids not being in an environment that is supportive of their academic achievement, and they want a different option. And that's why Patty voted with us as Republicans on this issue. But yeah, they'll tell us a lot of things that they agree with behind the scenes or personally, but they're like, hey, I can't vote that way because my caucus leadership says I have to vote this way. And it's sometimes unfortunate, but I think we got to keep fighting the fight on that issue. And, just because we want to strengthen the process to receive that doesn't mean we even personally believe that that's the best option that somebody should have. But why not consider the health
Why
standards?
not make it as safe as possible if it's going to be legal? I mean, it just seems like that's a no-brainer.
Amen.
That is a no-brainer that you want, and especially if your mantra is women's health, okay? And that, look, it's the reason why I think that, it's funny, I had Senator Shelley Eccles on last week kind of giving us an update and also talking about some of the decisions she made not to run. But she said the thing that surprised her the most was that the issues that affected the fewest number of people had the biggest response to
Agreed. That is every session, and I'm reminded each session like it's a head scratcher, but yes.
Yeah, it's where you get the worst problems. So I know that was a little bit of a left field thing, but something I feel strongly about. I didn't expect it to go anywhere this time because I think nobody wanted to deal with any of the life issues in this particular legislative session, and I understand that. It is something interesting that we're going to watch because Dobbs, which is what overturned Roe v. Wade, is, I think, a 15-week limit. And I think that, honestly, I wrote in my book 20 years ago that I think that most Americans would get behind a first trimester limitation. There's going to be, I'm not happy with that, but there are people on the left that wouldn't be happy with it either. Yeah. But it would be something that most people could agree with. We just have gotten to where we need to do more of that. We need to talk more. I talk all the time about how we need to vote, we need to parent our children and grandchildren, and we need to start having more face-to-face conversations with people. Especially
people that we don't always agree with. I've had some really deep conversations on that issue with both men and women in the Democratic caucus regarding that. And my question to them is, listen, I have no problem telling you I believe that life begins at conception. Where do you believe life begins? Just tell me the answer to that question. And if you want to argue the point that it's 15 weeks or 20 weeks or 30 weeks, then go out and argue that, because to me it's about acknowledging that is a life and that life deserves protection. I happen to be further right than you on this issue. I believe it's a conception, but we can't continue to become the bad guy because we happen to believe that human life has the same value as the mother that carries it. And to me, I think we've got to continue to teach and educate people on that issue. And it is a states' rights issue now until it becomes a federal issue again.
We're with Representative Will Wade, and we'll be back with another segment with him. It is the Martha Zoller Show. I'm here with Will Wade. I listened to that guy's accent. I don't want to hold it against him that he's a Northerner, but he doesn't understand how important this mail situation is, people.
It's a huge deal.
Are you hearing about it up here?
Listen, I'm getting complaints as a state rep. I'm getting the complaints as a banker. We've got clients that are trying to get, their statements. It's tax season, making their loan payment, taking care of a kid that they're depositing funds for their college student, and it is horrible. It is a crisis, honestly.
So Lynn had ordered a piece, replacement part for the pool pump. Okay, yeah, first world problems, right? So, and it got he kept getting this message because we get those alerts. It's in Palmetto, Georgia. It's in and we for 15 days. Yeah. It was in Palmetto, Georgia, and when we got it, it was broken. And so we had to order another one. So, and that's a small problem, but you can magnify that by all the other things. And I'm a huge defender of the post office in general, because I think that really, I said years ago they ought to just go to $1.50, because when you think about what it actually costs to get it from one place to another, if that's what they need, just do it. don't do these incremental 3 cents, 4 cents, 5 cents, because how many letters do you send? I don't send that many anymore.
That's right.
Okay, pretty much everything I do. Now, you guys, you're a banker. I do my bills through the bank, and some things they electronically submit, but there's still bills that you put in that they mail it for you.
They get a cut check and they mail it.
They cut a check and they mail it, so it could get held up. And so I'm dealing with this right now with one of my in-laws' bills where I've paid it. It's been paid. The check is cleared, but for whatever reason, it took a long time to get there, and so they haven't caught up. But it's those kinds of things that really get under people's skin, doesn't it? Oh,
it is, and it's a reminder for me as a elected official. Our job is to be responsive to the constituents that we serve on issues. I had a client, and I'm not picking on the Secretary of State, but they, I'm as concerned about the licensure process in our state. And this is a UGA grad, got his doctorate in veterinarian services, can do both, large animal vet as well as your puppy or your kitten. And he has been waiting almost 120 days to get his license acknowledged and approved by the Secretary of State's office, and just was dealing with no response. And thankfully, we've got a couple of folks that work in the Secretary of State's office. He alerted me, and I pick up the phone, get to the right person, and it's resolved in 3 days.
Yeah, and he was here yesterday, and we talked about that. That is something that is high on their list. Everybody thinks about the Secretary of State as it relates to elections, but they have a lot of other responsibilities too.
Yep, and it's very important for business. I mean, we are the number one state in which to do business, but we also want to make sure that we can have access and speed to that workforce as they come out of college and they start their business and they get their licenses and those kind of things. So those are the kind of constituent services things that we have. I've also noticed over the last few years, people have lost a sense of urgency in their job. And there has been some apathy that has creeped in. Obviously, some of that's the comfort of, hey, I got to work from home, for about a year, or 3 days a week I'm out of the office, 2 days I'm in. And there seems to be one of my peer members in the House said, he goes, people are acting like we're Europe. We're not Europe. We're America.
Well, it's funny because there are a lot of jobs, a lot of this job creation is that companies have literally had to fire people, rewrite the job descriptions saying you got to come to the office, and then rehire. A lot of the people are getting rehired into the job, but it's being very clear that, hey, baby, you've got to be in the office 4 days a week or 5 days a week or whatever it is. And I think that's important. I do think that, hey, if you want a flexible schedule like that, then start your own business. You'll never work as many days as you do when you run your own business, but you do have the flexibility to be off when you want to be off.
That's right.
And that's one of those things, but you pay for it. I mean, you don't get paid on the days that you're off if you're in a small business. So
Amen.
It's interesting. Now, of these study committees, I'm looking at this list of study committees, and there's a whole bunch of things that seem small. But what do you think is the biggest thing on the study committee list for y'all in the House?
For me, I think the one that there's two that I'm very interested in and I'm following. That's the H.R. 1135, the study committee on credit card fee on state sales and excise tax. I understand the reasons that some people want to have this argument, but to me, it's picking merchants versus banks. As a community banker, I'm very staunch that I don't think that we need to interject. There was a recent settlement between one large retailer and one of the largest credit card processors, and to me, that's the businesses coming to terms to settle a disagreement about who's paying what, and I just don't think it's a big enough issue. But there are people that are on the other side that want to continue to study it, and so I think that's one I'm going to be involved in and attend those meetings and weigh in on it with my banking background. And the other one that I think is, all of them, there's several, obviously, Committee on Exchange, Storage, and Bond Coverage for Agriculture Products. Everybody forgets that Georgia, our number one business is still agriculture. So understanding the threats to these type of things can be a very important thing. And so I think it's important to make sure that the insurance coverage that these folks have, the ability to store and keep food safe and consumable and keep that marketplace going is important. I don't know as much about that one. And the last one that I'm very interested in is vapes. it's trash. It is horrible. And look, I understand there's a libertarian in me. I'm a North Georgia guy, kind of do no harm, leave me alone. I'm not messing with you. But there are kids that are in 4th and 5th grade. My kids are in elementary school, and a kid just a couple of grades older than them had a vape in school. And this child now has lung issues because they're developing. And this stuff can be picked up at a gas station easily without any oversight. And the products themselves can be manipulated. Obviously with THC, and is there going to be a vapor form of fentanyl? I don't want to think those things, but we have to think about the risk. And so I think those study committees are on very specific, small topics, but the implications of policy can be huge and can affect every Georgian. So those are some that there are known. There's also going to be a few working groups. So each chairman of committees may have a policy issue that they want to tackle, but it's not going to be in the form of a big study committee yet. It's in the form of, hey, we need to do all these things. Education, Chris Irwin is talking about some things to tweak in the QBE formula. Instead of trying to do a whole rewrite, let's take a look at 3 or 4 specific targets, and I'm looking forward to being on a working group with him for that.
Well, and I'm looking closely at H.R. 1384, the study committee on semester and quarter systems at USG
yes.
and TCSG, because back in the Zell Miller days, we were supposed to have this worked out. And for a time we did. And we got off track again. So we need to get that back to where if you start out at a technical college, you can transfer to a college and everything transfers. So hopefully that'll work out. Will Wade, if people need to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Sure. So my email is will.wade@house.ga.gov. And I give my phone number out. It's 678-776-5395. I try to be as accessible as I can for both my banking job as well as the state representative for Dawson, Lumpkin, and White Counties in this greater area, because I work with a lot of the folks because we have like Lake Lanier issues. The Lake Caucus, we have to work together on a lot of things with Emery Donahue and Matt Dubnik and some others, Lauren McDonald and Brent Cox. We're all close friends. We all work together, and I appreciate all that you're doing and getting the voice out. And God bless you and your passion. Appreciate you.